Hello, this is Steve Keim from IBM. I'd like to present a special version of our optimized security environment, specifically around the integration of Guardium into QRadar. What I'd recommend is there's a presentation by David Drucker that actually goes into the entire presentation. I'll start sort of where he left off and go deeper into how Guardium is configured and operates with QRadar. In David's presentation, he presented the case for an employee, Jane Doe, who logged into the system, later did a SQL injection, and then further took that information, accessed the database, and was able to exploit that and steal some money. So if we look real quick at the actual diagram that he had, Jane logging into through our secure web gateway, does a SQL injection. SQL injection gives credentials that allows you to access the DB console, and from the DB console we stole some money. What I'd like to do now is show you a slightly different version of this. The difference is really the additions of other scanning mechanisms in this environment. I wanted to show you how to import assessment data from Guardium into QRadar. We've set up two different feeds into the QRadar environment. One, we're pulling in events from the server, the database tab itself from Guardium. We're also taking in vulnerability information. The events come in through log sources. In particular to Guardium, you'll notice that the Guardium log source is auto-discovered. I'm not going to show you the specific of this, but in the command line interface in Guardium, what you do is there's a command line that says take my events, send them on port 514, and here's the IP address or FQDN of the QRadar server. You would do that for events, for information, and for errors. The first time that event or any of those events occur, it'll automatically log in or check in with QRadar, and QRadar will start showing those events. I've logged into the web interface to Guardium. As you can see, there's a number of events that I just created by running through the demo. To set up the assessment, you go into Tools, go to Security Assessment Builder. I've already created an Altoro assessment. That's the site that we actually exploit. You would configure tests, and I've done this ahead of time, and what I would do is select the test that I want to run, and once I've selected those, I would run it once, and I would view the results. Now, it's not particularly interesting, but for purposes of this demo, one thing I would like to point out is it comes back with the results of the test. What we want to do now is we want to get this information transmitted into QRadar. A couple different ways to do it. One, if you click the download XML, we can export an XML for Access or for SCAP format, and then we can place that someplace where QRadar can import that data manually. A better solution for that is actually using the Audit Process Builder. And what the Audit Process Builder does is it builds a process whereby you can establish a regular scan of your database, weekly, monthly, daily, hourly, and then store that in a place where QRadar is able to access it and add it to its asset vulnerability information. Our data is now in a place where QRadar is able to get at it. How do we get QRadar to pull the data in? So we'll go back to QRadar, and the QRadar has a mechanism called VA scanners that allows you to import data from a variety of different sources. As you can see on the list, we have one for app scan, so we're able to pull in application security information, which we take advantage of a SQL injection vulnerability that's in our app. QRadar itself has a Nmap scanner, which I've configured, so we know what ports are open and what services are running. Further on the bottom, I have the endpoint manager, which is an agent that's running on the server itself that provides data about what are the applications that are vulnerable. Our environment is a Microsoft environment, and it has vulnerabilities that we should really patch. The Guardium interface is very straightforward. Again, much like the event collecting piece, the configuration is quick, and it allows it also pre-configures all of the event information in such a way that it makes sense when the data comes in. So we give it a name. We're using the Access Scanner. We give it a address or FQDN of the location where we actually have this assessment. We give it the credentials to be able to access on a path. Now we're configured to pull data into QRadar. So if we look under Assets and go to VA Scan, you can see I've run several different scans here. I'm going to add a scan for a Guardium. Now, much of the information as to what the IP address of the server is and where the data is in the assessment itself. What QRadar does is it looks at that assessment information and understands what IP address is associated with that. And in fact, we're putting in some additional required information for a scan to occur here, but Guardium sort of ignores this piece of information because the content of the assessment really better defines the information that's being pulled in. A key important here is the start time or interval. If I've created an automatic process on Guardium that builds the assessment once a day or once a week, what I'd like to do is make sure that my QRadar picks up on that on the same period. I'm going to cancel out of this, and what I want to do now is I'm going to show you the results of this. If we go into the asset profiles and the server that I have running not only our application, but I'm also running DB2 and some other data structures. I'm going to go search on that, pull it up, and I'm going to go look at what the vulnerabilities are on this server. As was presented in David's presentation, we collect data from the endpoint manager, and as you can see on the screen, there are a variety of things that we should really address. Microsoft vulnerabilities that should be patched, Java vulnerabilities that should be patched, and we might even find services that are running or applications that are running that need to be patched that shouldn't actually be on the server itself. We'll go down a little bit further here. We can see that we have some open ports that comes from QRadar, and from our Nmap scan, DB2 is how we actually do our demo, so it's important to have that port open. But again, as a security analyst or as an individual responsible to secure this particular asset, you might find that other ports shouldn't be open. Below this port scan, we now have the results of the assessment that we've run. Now, I've run a slightly different assessment than the one that I just showed you, mostly because our DB2 had been patched and it didn't provide any interesting information. So, point here is that you're able to pull in the vulnerability information and to reflect on how do I want to set my rules so that I secure this server, the application, and the database better. So that's really what you need to do. You set up on Guardium, you point the log information so that the log information goes to QRadar. In Guardium, you create an assessment. The assessment is stored at a staging place where QRadar is able to grab that. You set up a time frame. I want to do this a day, every week, every month, whatever. And you synchronize your scans or assessments with the collection of the data with QRadar. The result of all of that is you get a better insight and profile of the vulnerabilities associated with your servers, your applications, as well as your database. Thank you very much. Again, this is Steve Keim from IBM.